Welcome back. You are listening to the home of forbidden romances. Prepare yourself, because tonight's story will leave you breathless. Sign the divorce papers, Valerius, and get that hideous scar out of my sight. I can't stomach looking at you for another second. The heavy parchment slammed onto the mahogany desk with the force of a gunshot, the sound echoing through the cavernous, frozen silence of the Duke's private study. Outside, the thunder of the imperial capital rolled like a war drum, but inside, the air was thick with the scent of distressed pheromones and the sharp, biting aroma of top-shelf brandy. Kalen Varric, the Grand Duke of the North, known as the Empire's war god, stood looming over the desk. His obsidian eyes were cold, devoid of the warmth that had flickered there only months ago. Clinging to his arm was a creature of soft silk and perfumed oils, Lady Alara, the reigning beauty of the court, who looked at the man standing opposite them with a sneer of undisguised triumph. Valerius Thorn did not flinch. He stood with the quiet, spine-stiffening dignity of a man who had long expected the blade to fall. He was slender, his frame deceptively fragile beneath the high-collared, modest tunics he wore to hide his body. But it was his face that drew the eye, or rather, repelled it. A jagged, angry burn scar, the color of dried wine, marred the left side of his face, stretching from his temple down to his jaw, twisting the corner of his mouth into a perpetual tragic grimace. In a world that worshipped the perfection of omegas, Valerius was a stain, a broken thing. "You heard the Duke," Alara purred, her voice dripping with artificial sweetness, as she traced a manicured finger down Kalen's bicep. "The palace is preparing for the spring solstice. Surely you didn't expect to stand by Kalen's side during the waltz? The rumors are already cruel enough without you frightening the foreign dignitaries." Valerius shifted his gaze from the woman to his husband. They had been married for 2 years. A political arrangement, certainly, forced by the late emperor to humiliate the rising power of the Varric Duchy by saddling the wolf of the north with the ugly duckling of the Thorn family. But Valerius had thought. Foolishly, he had thought they had built something. Not love, perhaps, but a partnership. He had managed the estate's finances, reorganized the supply lines for Kalen's armies, and brewed the calming tonics that soothed Kalen's alpha ruts when no one else dared approach him. "Is that truly the reason, Kalen?" Valerius asked, his voice low and raspy, like dry leaves skittering over stone. "Because I am unpleasant to look at." Kalen looked away, his jaw tightening so hard a muscle feathered beneath his skin. For a split second, his pheromones spiked, a scent of burning cedar and ozone that usually signaled aggression. "I need an Omega who fits the title of Duchess. Someone perfect, someone whole, not a cripple who hides in the shadows." Kalen grabbed a quill and thrust it toward him. "Take the settlement. It is enough to buy a hole in the countryside where you can rot in peace. Just go." The cruelty was precise, surgical. It struck the exact insecurities Valerius had confessed to Kalen in the dark of their shared bedchambers during the rare nights the Duke had held him. Valerius slowly reached out. His hand, pale and trembling slightly, took the quill. He didn't look at the settlement figure. He didn't look at Alara's gloating smile. He signed his name with a flourish of ink that felt like bloodletting. Valerius Thorn. No longer Varric. He placed the quill down. He reached into his tunic and pulled out a heavy signet ring, the ring of the ducal consort, and placed it on top of the papers. "I do not want your money, your grace," Valerius said softly. He raised his head, and for the first time, he swept the hair away from his scarred side, exposing the ruin of his face fully to the light. His eyes, a startling, clear gray, bored into Kalen's. "You called me ugly, but the only ugly thing in this room, Kalen, is your heart. I hope she is worth the price of your soul." Valerius turned on his heel. He didn't run. He walked out of the study, out of the manor, and into the pouring rain without a coat, disappearing into the dark maw of the city. The heavy oak doors clicked shut. Silence returned to the study. "Finally," Alara sighed, releasing Kalen's arm and stepping toward the desk to pick up the ring. I thought he would never. Shink! The sound of steel leaving a sheath cut the air. Alara froze. She looked down to see a broadsword resting on her shoulder, the razor edge biting into the silk of her dress, drawing a bead of blood against her neck. Don't touch it! Kalen's voice was no longer a shout, but a low, demonic growl that vibrated in the floorboards. If your skin touches his ring, I will remove your hand. Alara's eyes went wide, the color draining from her face. Your grace? But we won. The spy is gone. You said. I said I would play your game, Kalen hissed. I said I would drive him away to satisfy your masters. The Duke moved with terrifying speed. He grabbed Alara by the throat. Not enough to crush, but enough to terrify, and slammed her back against the bookshelves. Books tumbled around them. The Emperor threatened to have Valerius assassinated if I didn't annul the marriage. He used you to force my hand. He thought I would choose power over a scarred Omega. Kalen leaned in, his eyes glowing with the golden hue of a furious alpha. But you made a mistake. You made me say things to him. Unforgivable things. Just to ensure he left the city before your assassins could get to him. You made me break my own heart to save his life. You love him. Alara choked out, clawing at his hand. That monster. He is not a monster, Kalen roared, throwing her to the floor. He is the only thing in this godforsaken empire that is real. Kalen turned to his head of guard, who had materialized from the shadows the moment Valerius had left. Take her to the dungeons. Get every name she knows. If she hides a single contact, burn the information out of her. And Valerius, my lord? The guard asked, eyeing the signed divorce papers. Kalen stared at the signature. The ink was still wet. His chest heaved, a hollow ache expanding where his heart should be. Let him go. If he stays near me, the Emperor kills him. Let him hate me. Hate keeps him warm. Hatred keeps him away from the crossfire. Kalen picked up the ring Valerius had left behind. He brought it to his lips, closing his eyes, inhaling the fading scent of the Omega, rainwater and old parchment. Forgive me, my love, he whispered to the empty room. One day, when the throne is mine, I will crawl to the ends of the earth to beg for your pardon. 3 years later, the kingdom of Ethelgard was a harsh land, separated from the empire by a jagged mountain range. It was a place of wild magic and rough seas, far from the stifling politics of the imperial court. In a small, cliffside clinic overlooking the churning gray ocean, a doctor worked tirelessly. He was known simply as the healer. He wore a porcelain half-mask to cover the left side of his face, a beautiful piece painted with blue wisteria flowers. Hold him down, Valerius ordered, his voice steady as he stitched the wound of a fisherman mauled by a sea drake. His hands were deft, glowing with a faint, teal light. Healing magic he had suppressed in the Empire because Omegas were forbidden from practicing the arcane arts. You're a miracle worker, Doc, the fisherman grunted as Valerius finished. I'm just a man with a needle, Valerius replied with a faint, sad smile. He wiped his hands and walked to the window. The sea air was good for him. Here no one cared about his face. They only cared that he saved their children from fevers and their husbands from injuries. He had found peace. He had buried the name Varric deep in the soil of his garden. But peace, Valerius had learned, was often the calm before the storm. The bells of the town square began to toll, a frantic, rhythmic clanging that signaled an invasion, or an arrival. Valerius stepped out onto the porch of his clinic. Down in the harbor, a massive black warship was docking. The sails bore a sigil that made Valerius's blood turn to ice. A black wolf on a field of silver. The Imperial fleet. Valerius turned to flee, to pack his bag, but he stopped. The town square was already swarming with soldiers in black armor. And marching at the head of the column, looking more like a god of death than a man, was the new emperor, Kalen Varric. He looked older, harder. A scar now ran through his eyebrow, mirroring the placement of Valerius's own, though far less severe. He wore the imperial crown, but he wore it like a burden, not a prize. Valerius shrank back into the shadows of his porch, his heart hammering against his ribs. Asterisk, why is he here? Ethelgard is neutral territory. Asterisk, bring him to me. Kaelin's voice boomed over the square, amplified by magic. I know he is here. The healer with the mask. The townspeople, loyal to Valerius, hesitated. A burly blacksmith stepped forward. We have no quarrel with the Empire, Your Majesty, but the healer is under our protection. Kaelin dismounted from his warhorse. He didn't draw his sword. He walked toward the blacksmith, his hands raised in a gesture of surrender that shocked the crowd. I did not come to conquer Ethelgard, Kaelin said, his voice raw, stripped of its usual command. I came to retrieve my heart. From the shadows of the clinic, Valerius felt a pull in his gut, the undeniable, agonizing tug of a fated bond. He gasped, clutching his chest. He had spent 3 years taking illegal suppressants to drown out the bond, but seeing Kaelin in the flesh shattered his defenses. Kaelin's head snapped up. His eyes locked onto the clinic on the cliff. Even from this distance, the Alpha sensed him. Valerius. It wasn't a command. It was a prayer. Valerius stepped out. There was no point in hiding. He stood on the cliff edge, the wind whipping his white medical coat around him, the porcelain mask gleaming in the sunlight. Kaelin began to climb the winding stone stairs to the clinic. He didn't run. He ascended with the heavy, desperate trudge of a pilgrim climbing a holy mountain. His guards tried to follow, but he waved them back. When Kaelin reached the top, he was breathless. He stopped 10 paces from Valerius. You found me, Valerius said, his voice cold. Have you come to finish the job? Is my existence still an insult to your eyes, Your Majesty? Kaelin winced as if struck. He looked at Valerius, at the mask, at the defiant tilt of his chin, at the strength radiating from him. You were never an insult, Kaelin choked out. You were the only beauty I ever knew. Liar, Valerius spat. I remember your words. Asterisk hideous. Ruined. A cripple. Asterisk. I had to. Kaelin took a step forward, desperation cracking his composure. The late Emperor. He had assassins in the walls. If I had shown you an ounce of affection, if I had hesitated to sign those papers, you would have been dead before sunrise. I had to make you leave. I had to make you hate me so much that you would run far enough away to be safe. Valerius paused. He analyzed Kaelin's face. He saw the sleepless circles under the eyes, the tremor in the hands that had once wielded a claymore with steady precision. And now, Valerius asked quietly, the Emperor is dead. You wear his crown. I killed him, Kaelin said simply. I burned the corruption out of the capital. I secured the borders. I made the Empire safe. He dropped to his knees. The Emperor of the known world, the Wolf of the North, knelt in the dirt before the village doctor. I made the world safe, Kaelin whispered, looking up with eyes full of tears, so that you could come back to it, without me if you wish, but safe. Kaelin reached into his breast pocket and pulled out a small velvet pouch. He opened it. Inside was the signet ring Valerius had left behind, now strung on a simple silver chain. I never took it off, Kaelin said. Every day for 3 years, it has rested against my skin. I don't want you to come back because I command it. I don't want a duchess. I don't want a trophy. Kaelin lowered his head, pressing his forehead against the hem of Valerius's coat. I am just a man who lost his soulmate. I am begging you, Valerius. Give me the chance to court you properly. Let me earn every scar. Let me worship the face I was too cowardly to defend. Valerius looked down at the man who had shattered him. He felt the anger, the years of loneliness, the bitter nights. But beneath that, he felt the bond singing, vibrant and alive. He saw the truth in Kaelin's posture. A true alpha does not kneel, unless it is for his mate. Valerius reached up and unclasped his mask. He let the porcelain fall to the grass. It didn't break. It just settled there, a discarded shell. He revealed his face. The burns, the twisted skin, the history of his pain. "I am not the same man you married, Kaelin," Valerius said softly. "I am not a silent political pawn. I have a life here. I have a purpose. Then I will stay here," Kaelin vowed into the fabric of his coat. "I will chop wood for your fire. I will carry your medical bag. I will abdicate the throne tomorrow if it means I can wake up and see your face." Valerius sighed, a long, shuddering breath that released 3 years of tension. He reached down and rested his hand on Kaelin's head, his fingers tangling in the thick, dark hair. "You will not abdicate," Valerius said, his voice gaining a sliver of its old warmth. "The Empire needs a ruler. And perhaps the Empire needs a healer, too." Kaelin's head snapped up, hope blazing in his eyes like a sunrise. "But," Valerius added, his eyes narrowing sharply, "you will not sleep in my bed. You will sleep in the guest quarters. You will work for your keep. And if you ever raise your voice at me again, I will poison your tea with a paralytic that will leave you unable to speak for a week. Am I clear?" Kaelin let out a wet, shaky laugh, pressing a kiss to Valerius's palm. "Crystal clear, my love. Crystal clear." Valerius watched the Emperor weep with relief, and for the first time in a long time he didn't feel ugly. He felt powerful. The scar on his face tingled, no longer a mark of shame, but a testament to the fire he had survived, and the fire he had finally tamed. And that is how the scarred healer brought the Emperor to his knees. If you enjoyed seeing Kaelin grovel for the forgiveness he barely deserved, destroy that like button, and tell me in the comments. Would you forgive a husband who broke your heart to save your life? Or is the betrayal of trust unforgivable? I'll be reading your answers. Subscribe for the next chapter. Until then,